Hey, I like it back here. It's like a party.
Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about cadence. I'm going to cover as much on cadence as I can. It's one of those subjects that I mentioned in my previous video. I kind of try to avoid because cadence is such a specialized thing. And for me, it doesn't matter if you get analyzed or you have a computer or somebody watches you ride. I think that everybody eventually finds out what their sweet spot is in terms of cadence, because it's something that experience in doing different types of rides at different paces in different type of terrains, whether you're riding the flats, the rollers, or even climbing. It takes a while for a person to get enough miles and experience in their legs to realize what works for them. Now, what is cadence? Cadence is the amount of revolutions one of your legs makes while you're pedaling every minute, and we measure it by RPM, revolutions per minute, and it may be 100 revolutions per minute, 85 revolutions per minute. Cadence can be measured. You can count it out. I don't recommend it you do. The simplest way to do it is to have a bike computer and then have a simple cadence sensor that you'll be able to see on the screen, and it'll tell you what your RPM or what your cadence is throughout the ride. Oftentimes, people get home from a ride and they look at their cadence sensor and it'll tell them what their average cadence is. And it'll usually give a little bit of a lower number than what you're probably doing when you're at your optimal speed. Like it may say 72. And you may think that your cadence is 72 and it's not. That takes into consideration when you're starting out, when you're slowing down, even the periods of time right before you stop pedaling. All of that gets taken into the average of what your average cadence is as you're riding. That's not the number you want. The number you want is when you're in a pack or in a pace line and you're cruising and you're really comfortable. You feel like, man, this is great. I'm not exerting too much power. My heart rate is very comfortable. And you look down at your cadence sensor and it says 85 RPM. That's your number.
Film me. Catching the group.
So today, I'm going to talk about the type of cadence that you should have when you're doing a warm-up for a ride. I'm also going to talk about the cadence that you need to have when you're kind of like humming along on the flats, you know, that sweet spot. I'm going to talk about cadence when you're riding, not just in flat terrain, but over rollers. And I'll touch a little bit on cadence when you're climbing. That's the one that I like talking about the least because I think it's so specialized. I'll also talk about the dynamics between your fit, your saddle height, and the positioning of your cleats and how that'll actually affect your ability to deal with cadence properly. And I think that once we do that, we'll have covered the entire gamut in terms of my version of cadence for cycling. Now let's start this whole thing off by talking about the cadence that I use for warm-up. Some people like a very high cadence to really get their heart rate up. Others, like me, for example, I prefer a more relaxed approach to work myself into the ride. What I've learned is that if the ride starts out fire, meaning really, really fast, I will have to go a little bit higher in my cadence than normal to kind of like wake up my system, then gradually bring my cadence down as I work myself into the ride. If the ride is more kind of endurance oriented, I'm able to start at a lower cadence, but not where I'm taxing my legs. Just kind of like going easy, pedaling nice and relaxed until my system kind of like warms up slowly and I notice that I start picking up my speed and picking up my intensity. But those are the two approaches that I have with cadence in terms of warming up. Now, the cadence that I use once I'm rolling along in a flat terrain, warm up is done, and now I'm focusing on cruising. More than likely, you're going to need to be in your big ring, and that means either the 53, 52, 50, the 48, or whatever people are using these days. And you're going to leave it in the big ring. From there, the adjustments that you're going to be making to your speed are going to be made on your cassette. And typically on rides where you're cruising along at a normal speed, be it solo or even in a group ride, you're probably going to be shifting somewhere between the 13 to for the more extreme speeds, up to about the 18 tooth. The reason why I'm emphasizing those gears is because this gives you, in most systems, single cog jumps between your gears, which helps you to control your cadence. One thing you don't want to have is snappy accelerations where you're in a 15 1 minute and the next time you shift you're up into the 17. That's not good. That's giving you very drastic changes in your cadence. And I did a video and I'll post a link for that where I go into a great amount of detail using a website called bikecalc.com to let you know what's going on with your cadence in certain gears at certain speeds. So obviously for me, because of the experience that I've had in riding, I don't really need a cadence sensor. In fact, for years I rode without a computer. I got a computer because I really wanted to monitor my heart rate. And even in that situation, I don't have a cadence sensor on there. But just because of all the years of experience that I'm riding, I usually default into 85 or 90 once I'm cruising. This isn't taken into account for situations where it gets windy or I'm climbing. Obviously, I'll talk about those a little bit later, but those require something different. I'm just talking about just kind of like cruising along in a pace line, even going over the rollers. That's where I'm at, 85 to 90 RPM. Next, cadence for accelerating out of corners so that you can save your legs. Typically, as I'm approaching a turn or a corner, I drop a couple gears. If I was in a 15 while rolling, I'll go to the 17, so I'll do clack, clack, or to the 18, clack, clack, clack. I adjust my speed, whether that means just kind of like air braking or tapping my brakes a little bit in preparation for going into the corner. Once I approach the corner, I find my line, I carry as much speed safely, and then while I'm in that either 18 cog or 17 cog, then spin up to a higher than normal cadence, 95 or 100 RPM, whatever that's going to be, and then bring your speed up at that higher cadence and then gradually go back into the gear where you have more tension. So you're going to go from the 18 down to the 17, down to the 16, down to the 15. That's how I approach using cadence while I'm cornering. Next is the cadence for dealing with rollers. How do I deal with approaching rollers if I'm riding on flats and then all of a sudden we start approaching rolling terrain? Well, one of the things that I'm going to do, I'm going to carry as much momentum and speed into the base of the climb. My first shift happens once I feel the speed beginning to bog down, not before. I see a lot of people start shifting too soon. It's like they see a hill or an incline and they start shifting even before they get on the incline. I believe that's a mistake because what happens is you start to spin out, bounce, and you start to lose your power. If it's really steep, I'll shift up 2 or 3 gears. If it's shallow, I'll shift 1 gear at a time. Make sure you can feel the tension on your chain. This is very, very important. You don't want to get to a point where you feel like you're going to that point where you're spinning and you're not putting out power. That's not helpful. I maintain my cadence over the crest of the climb, meaning that once the climb starts to shallow, I don't start shifting into higher gears. Much like with cornering, it's okay if you start to spin up a little bit higher RPM as you start to crest the climb. Once I have crested the climb and it starts to flatten out, then I'll gradually start shifting back into my cruising speed gear, not before. Now, cadence for climbing, I've mentioned this before. Cadence for climbing is a very personalized thing. Some people are okay with kind of like grinding up a climb like 80, 85 RPM. Some people spin up like Chris Froome, for example, or Lance Armstrong before him would spin a very high cadence. You got to find out what works for you in terms of climbing. One thing you don't want to do is you don't want to blow your knees up. Nobody needs to do that. So find a place where you feel like I'm putting out good power. Your legs don't feel too taxed. Your heart rate is not too high. And you're carrying momentum and speed comfortably up the climb, meaning that you're not like losing. You don't feel like, oh my gosh, I need to get off the bike. I believe anybody can climb. Like people say that, if you're heavier, you're going to have more of a difficult time climbing. I agree with that. It is going to be more of a challenge the more weight you're carrying up a climb, but you can still find an optimal range and speed of cadence to carry a certain speed up that climb and be able to do it comfortably. Well, as comfortable as climbing can be, but it's something that you've got to work out on your own. So cadence for climbing, highly individualized. The next area of consideration regarding our cadence is our fit on the bike. And fit is obviously a very broad subject that requires its own video, but today I want to focus on two key areas, not suggesting that you ignore the others, but if there's two things that I would say you got to make sure that you get these things dialed in darn near perfectly, is your saddle position, meaning the height of your saddle, as well as the fore and aft position relative to the bottom bracket. That's got to be gotten right. The next area of equal importance is to make sure that you get your cleat position set near perfect for the way how you're going to pedal on the bike. Two areas that'll go a long way into making sure that when you pedal, you have no hip rocking, little or no bouncing in the saddle, and you're a smooth operator on the bike. So for me, cadence is how you balance your cycling economy. Cycling requires both cardiovascular strength as well as muscular strength. Too high a cadence and you start to spike your heart rate, deplete your energy resources. Too low a cadence where you're taxing your legs and your legs disappear for the rest of the ride. Optimum cadence, what it does is it allows you to put out the right amount of power sustainably. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think that's everything that I wanted to say about cadence. Please jump into the comment section below, share your thoughts on this subject. I'd love to hear what you consider to be the optimal cadence for you, not only rolling along on the flats, but also how you approach climbing. And, oh, this one's really important, warm up as well. All right, guys, one quick reminder, Cafecito con Lou 3 is coming up November 12th, so weekend after next. And I've heard that a few people are planning to come from out of town. And I don't think it's just for Cafecito con Lou. You're probably coming in town, got some family to visit, and you're going to jump into our ride. Love to have you. Now, our ride is on Sunday. If you're looking for something to do on Sunday, reach out to me on my social media, and I'll make sure that I'll put you in touch with some of the rides that take place down here in South Florida. Everything from mild to wild. All right. All right, guys. As always, our aim here at the channel is to inform, instruct, inspire. Be blessed.